Halo Infinite has a problem. It's got a lot of problems that you're probably aware of. This is one that you are probably not aware of. So I'm going to help you become aware of it and how we can fix it to help your enjoyment of the game overall, long-term, and hopefully allow yourself to hate the game less. Maybe give you a new sense of fun, motivation to play the game. Who knows what's going to come of it from your end. But we're going to go over the problem. I'm going to explain as much of it as I can and as quickly as I can as to not overbear you, and then we're going to go over the solution. If you already know what the problem is, go to this time code here. That'll just skip you right to the solution, or it's one of the chapters in the video. But if you're not aware, I highly recommend listening to what I have found out over the last year. Is that a year ago? Yeah, it was last April of when I found this issue out and when I took the steps to fix it. So let's get into it. Being on controller, obviously I've played for many, many, many years, played a whole lot of MCC, a whole lot of Apex, a lot of different games on controller. And leading up to Halo Infinite, I was playing a lot of different first-person shooters instead of it just being MCC. And when Halo Infinite started its flights, I remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. Something feels off about this game. But I didn't really put much thought into it. I didn't really think much of it because I was like, okay, it's in beta. We'll wait for final release. That's fine. But the game came out and it felt the same. And the same thing was echoed by a lot of friends that I had that said the same thing. Overall, it felt like shit. The aiming system of Halo Infinite felt like shit. And if you were there at all, and if you were kind of watching the community and just observing everything across the board, it seemed like almost every single player that played on controller when Halo Infinite was first launching was going through a sense crisis where people were running around going, no, you have to change to these dead zones, these specific dead zones, or what's gonna make it feel great. And I remember thinking even back then, same thing that I think now, I'm like, no game should have to have you change a setting like dead zones so much to even make the aiming system, one of the main inputs that you were inputting constantly, feel bearable or good. No game should have to force you to do that. Any game off the rip should feel good, fluid, normal. You might have to change your sensitivity a little bit, but overall it didn't feel great, and everyone was trying to figure out how to make it feel good, how to make their aiming feel fluid or responsive. And so it was dead zones. It was there's no aim assist when you're jumping, or there's no aim assist on the Commando, or there's no aim assist on Steam. You got to download the Windows version, and that's what I did. And I was like, yeah, this feels better, I'm pretty sure. I really couldn't tell if I was being placeboed with that. I can't remember it. Maybe it did for a while. They even recognized and said, we know there's an issue with Steam, and then they didn't say anything else about it. However, for over a year and a half, I could never figure out what it was about Halo Infinite that was the problem. I was still playing Apex alongside Halo Infinite. Even after a few months, I was going back and forth. And whenever I did, I was like, why does Apex feel so smooth with its aiming? And when I go to Halo Infinite, it feels like my reticle is being dragged through molasses. I feel like I have no control, and it's just slow and sluggish. It's like, I was playing on MCC with max sensitivity. It was not as fast as it could be. So already, I'm having to make an adjustment to how it feels, and even at the fastest sensitivity that I could put it at, it still really was not enough. So for a while, I was like, maybe it's just the max sensitivity is slower than MCC or something. But in April of 2023, I was having a really rough day mixed with a really rough ranked experience. But the next day I was like, okay, there's something wrong here and I need to figure it out. My thought process was like, maybe there's some input delay of some sort. I'm like, that's like the first thing that I can think of now. So I took my phone, did a slow-mo recording of the screen and my controller in view. And what I did was I pushed the right thumbstick into the edge as fast as I could. And I did this multiple times, all at, I was either default sensitivity or max, I can't remember, but standard sensitivities, dead zones. And then I did the same in MCC and the same in Apex. And so then I took that footage into Premiere Pro, did some changes to the frame rate, yada, yada, yada. What I found was that when I was recording Apex and Halo Reach or Halo 2 Anniversary, when I would push the thumbstick in, almost immediately was there a response. The thumbstick, sometimes per frame, wouldn't even reach the edge of the circle of the thumbstick. It wouldn't even reach it sometimes, and there would always be some sort of movement on screen. A frame would start to move. The reticle would start to move. However, with Halo Infinite, when I recorded this, the thumbstick would get pushed to the edge, and roughly 4 to 6 frames would go by until something started to move. And I was like, there it is. There's the issue. There is a fairly decent amount of input delay on this game on controller. Enough to where like the average person, and if they're playing it every single day, they're not going to really notice it. But if you're someone like me, again, who is swapping between these different first-person shooters from one that is responsive and my muscle memory is getting used to that, and then I go back to Halo Infinite and then my muscle memory is like, this doesn't feel what we like, no, like this is something's wrong. It's just a constant back and forth of me battling with my muscle memory of what feels good and what feels right and what it knows when it's using a thumbstick. That is what I found. And again, I did the math wrong in that initial tweet. All right, I finally did the math correctly. My phone, the slow motion camera, records in 240 FPS. I interpreted the footage into 60 FPS, and 4 to 6 out of 60 frames. When we take that and we times it by 0.25, because 60 FPS is a fourth of 240, that gives us about 17 to 25 milliseconds of delay. So when I found that out, I was like, well, shit, like there it is. Like there's the source of my problems. I don't want to play on controller anymore if this is going to be here forever. And as far as I know, it still is. It has not been fixed or even really addressed. I tested this on a Series S controller and an Elite 2 controller. Off the rip, my first initial thought was, okay, well, I've kind of played around with this little goofy thing in the past where I realized that Halo Infinite allows me to input a controller with a mouse at the same time. So I was like, what if I used a controller for like my movement and my crouching with a paddle and my D-pad and my bumper there for my abilities and my aiming or my grenade button, and then I put everything else over onto my mouse, which is a Logitech G502 Lightspeed or Hero if you have the wired one. So it's got a slew of extra buttons to use. And so that is what I did. And right off the rip, I was like, this is not bad. This feels kind of nice. I then tried it on Apex. However, there was an issue when I was trying to input both and aim. Super stuttery, filled with issues. It didn't feel smooth. You could very much tell like this was not something that needed to be happening at the same time. The system could not process both at the same time efficiently. So I used a program called Rewazd, R-E-W-A-S-D, which is actually now banned by Apex and Call of Duty for other reasons. It is a device remapping program, but I was using it to remap the buttons on my controller. What I did was I eliminated all of the inputs on the controller. I just threw them out completely, and I changed it so the controller was being recognized, quote unquote, as a keyboard. It was just inputting keyboard inputs so that, the game Apex just thought I was playing with a keyboard and a mouse. I used that program to remap the buttons, but I did not even need to use that program because everything that I needed it for could be done through Steam, and I could have saved $7. The reason that program was banned by Apex and Respawn and Call of Duty, there were other functions that it had that were technically cheating if you paid for more. So I wasn't able to use that program anymore, and I found that Steam had this function all along, so I swapped over to that, and it works no problem. And even while being on that program, I was initially doing the keyboard input on the controller end into Apex, like I said I had to. However, with Halo Infinite, I was still doing half controller, half mouse. And so for a bit, I would sometimes be on the keyboard and mouse input of the controller, if this makes sense. And it felt pretty good. And then I realized I was, and I swapped back over to the controller input, and it felt like my aim was just a little bit, just a little bit of resistance. It's very, very subtle, very subtle. And so while there are some people that do, and you very much can, you can just use half and half, like you don't have to go through the whole button remapping thing. I will say, however, there is a very slight and subtle amount of aim jitteriness, sluggishness when you are inputting both a mouse and a controller at the same time. It's very subtle. Might not even notice it, but I promise you it is there. So what I do suggest is what we're about to go through and remap the controller to just these keyboard inputs. You can do this for Apex, for Halo, for Overwatch. All those games reside within the Steam launcher. You could do this for Call of Duty and whatever else. I play Helldivers too like this, but that is the whole shtick. That is the whole story. If you listen to it, thanks. Hopefully it was beneficial in some way, but now we're going to get into the tutorial aspect and kind of show you how to do this. One of the main reasons that I do this is because I'm right-handed. And so when you go from an input method like controller, where most of the inputs are being depended upon with your right hand, and you go to something like keyboard and mouse, where most of the inputs are then moved all the way over to your left hand, it was not comfortable overall. And I'm not going to play something that is uncomfortable for an extended period of time. So I did this, and it was much more comfortable. Whereas, again, it was more of a balance of inputs and reliance. And that made things a lot easier. Again, it was still a transition because you're going from something that has aim assist, makes your life a whole lot easier, to something that doesn't, unless you're playing Halo Infinite, which you have a little bit, and it makes things more bearable, but it is definitely a transitionary period. I think that should be it. I think that's all I want to say on that matter. All right, welcome to the tutorial. aspect of this, I'm going to teach you how to turn your controller, Xbox, PlayStation, whatever you want, could be a Nintendo Switch Pro controller, whatever. We're going to convert it into a keyboard, quote unquote, keyboard input device, so you can now play half controller, half mouse, and allow yourself to a little bit more dependence back onto your right hand the way it is with the controller. I will say the prerequisites you'll probably need, are a Elite 2 controller. You could technically make it work without it, but this is what I have found to be most comfortable, is I have an Elite 2 controller and I have a Logitech G502 Lightspeed. This mouse has a lot of extra buttons, specifically 5 extra buttons that I use. Realistically, you could get away with just using 4, but whatever type of mouse you have, if it doesn't have a whole lot of buttons on it that you can use, like a Razer or something of that nature, you might have to look into getting a mouse that does have more inputs, because this might not be possible if you don't have the necessary amount of inputs to play the game at a comfortable pace and level. So keep that in mind as we move forward and you're kind of thinking exactly how you want to set this up. In your Steam settings over here on the left, you're going to click in-game. You're going to make sure that the Steam overlay while in-game is turned on. And then what you're going to do is then click controller, and you are going to obviously have your controller plugged in, but you are going to come down here and you are going to select enable Steam input for Xbox controllers or whatever controller you are using, PlayStation, Switch Pro, generic, whatever. And then if you are using an Elite 2 controller, you need to install the Xbox Extended Feature Support driver. That gives it access and support for the paddles. And then from there, you're good. After that, what you're then going to next do, you need to do this in potentially every game that you play. You might not need to, I can't remember, but go to the properties of the game that you want to swap these settings for. Make sure that for this particular game, the enable the Steam overlay while in game is turned on. And then also in the controller tab, make sure, it says that this is enabled. You can just say use general, use default settings, enable Steam input, whatever. Just make sure that that is there instead of it being disable Steam input. And that is done. This menu here should pop up where it says it's mostly playable with controller. You're going to then hit view controller settings. And from there, I have my own layout already, but it's going to show you its own particular layout. When you click on the layout, it's going to give you some recommended ones, my own layouts. You also have community layouts and templates. I just start right here with the keyboard and mouse one off the rip. So what you can do is we can do that. We're going to hit apply layout. From there, we are then going to hit edit layout. And this is what we're going to do bit by bit. Right off the rip, obviously you're not going to be using ABXY. So we're going to hit button pad. We're going to hit none. That's going to disable those buttons. And then we're not going to use the right bumper. So we're going to hit the gear icon. We're going to hit remove command. That's going to disable that. And the same for the back paddles. If you look on the back of your Elite 2 controller or Elite controller, if you're using one, it should have a little P1, P2, P3, P4 next to each one. I use P4. And so all of these other ones, same thing. Just going to hit the gear icon, remove the command, and then I'm going to convert this to whatever it is. For me in Halo Infinite, it is F. That is the ability use key. And then going down here to the menu buttons. Obviously, we're not going to use the main menu button here, so remove command. However, we still got to pause the game and we still got to look at the scoreboard. How do we do that? Off the rip, tab key right here. What we're going to do is we're going to hit the gear icon and we're going to change it from a regular press to a long press. Assuming you have the scoreboard in Halo Infinite set to the hold, where you have to hold the button to show the scoreboard instead of tap like it might be set to. I have it set to hold, but we have that set to long press, and then we can hit the gear icon again, hit add extra command, and then we can go to the keyboard, hit escape, and then now this button now has 2 functions, which is going to be integral for the entire process, especially in a game like Apex, because there are so many inputs in that game, but also in this game, you might not need it here. At the very least with Halo, just this instance to where this button has 2 functions, the pause button or the escape key and the tab key, which is for the scoreboard. Moving on to the D-pad, you can do whatever you want here and then just kind of map your bindings into in the game, but that's what that is normally set to. The triggers, right trigger, none. Going to disable it because we're not using it. And then the left trigger, there's a soft pull and a full pull. I don't really mess with that. I just kind of set it the same, each one. For this in particular, I experimented with both aiming in with my right mouse click and aiming in with my left trigger on the controller. And I found the left trigger to be more comfortable overall with just how I operate. So what I did here was I changed the left trigger to G. What I now basically do in game is I basically just swap the inputs for my grenade and for my aiming in. And then over into joysticks, right joystick, none, we're not using it. And left is already set up, WSD. ASD, and then clicking in is going to be the shift key, aka sprint. And it is basically fully set up, and it should work in game the way you would expect. No problem. You can basically just back out, open the game up. I don't know how, but I'm just now realizing I spoke incorrectly. I don't use my bumper as my action key. Sorry, my paddle. I use my bumper as that, which I think I skipped over. My paddle is my crouch, so that is control. My bumper is actually my F. I'm sorry, it is 1 a.m. right now, so I'm a little bit off the block. That should be it. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully this helped. Hopefully maybe this will give you a new way to play Halo Infinite or Apex or Overwatch or any other game on Steam in a new way. Maybe it'll just bridge you over to keyboard and mouse in full. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows how you'll use it? If you want to know what the Apex settings I use are, I'm going to export that file, that configuration, and plop it into my Discord. So if you want to join that, it's discord.gg/nadegod. The link is also in the description. You can download that, import it into your Steam, open it up, and I already have it preset. Or you can just kind of look around and see how exactly I was using it to begin with. But that is it. Thank you for watching. Hopefully it helped. Any questions you got, throw it down in the comments. I will let you know, or you can go to my Discord, ask me there, and I'll help you out. But yeah, have a great day.